takes is one
Mistake, yes.
yeah, then you're doomed. You either.
Got enough doom in my life without it.
Oh, so simple. So
7 minute is this one, and then just start and stop, and then both of those two.
Thank you.
It's loud and obnoxious, so.
Thank you. Okay, we got Dave. Thomas.
The next water advisory committee meeting.
You've asked me.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're out of there, huh? Oh, I get up as soon as I got on the board.
It's the last Wednesday of every month.
So I wanted to keep me posted on there's an agenda, but
Yeah, I shared, actually, I did share the agenda for the last meeting, and I'm working on meeting minutes, but I picked out some of the highlights to, we have time for me to report
Yeah.
tonight on what we talk about there. But yeah, I always try to have an agenda of some sort.
Yes. Always that.
Yeah.
Just need John.
yeah, I'd like to go over some of the ideas that they have.
Yeah,
So
well, did you listen to it, to the meeting, by any chance? It's actually not, it's a pretty good one to listen to. We went over a lot of different stuff.
is there a synopsis or?
Well, no, I'm putting together the meeting minutes, so that would be the synopsis, but we ended, well, I'll talk about the meeting, but one of the good things that came is that Corinne watched it and then got JDS to tell us they're going from June to the end of November. That's the water information they want from the 1 million. Because that was a point of consternation. I didn't know they needed, so.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and start the meeting. We do have a form, so we can go ahead and get going. All right. All right, we have a roll call, please. Candy?
We don't have.
You do. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Who's for?
Oh, there's David too.
Yep.
That's not a human, that's just electrons.
Oh, I did that twice.
You have a heavy lifters.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now can we have roll call?
Rebecca,
Here.
Dave Peterson,
Here,
Say here, Dave.
I did that. Say here.
Trustee Valentine, Trustee Stelter, Trustee Smith, here, Trustee Marco,
Here,
Trustee Vogt.
present.
Okay, we have a quorum and we can continue. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion, please? Yeah.
Are we recording? Let me make sure that the video is recording.
Yes.
Okay, I know it's last time I started 5 minutes into the meeting. I'm going to approve the agenda.
All right, do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, any discussion?
I wanted to add an agenda item for next meeting. But I don't know if I could do that, not for this one, but just to bring it on.
I always did that either just before or just after. we got a vote on the
Sure.
agenda.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure which way to go.
Yeah, well.
Other than that, I have no.
Yeah, go ahead and then
That's
we'll.
good.
vote
You want
on
me
it.
to, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to, I move to add to one of the, either of the June meetings agenda, a policy specifying what types of banners and flags can be displayed on town property.
Okay,
Sorry to have to do that, but I think it's an important discussion.
all right, so that's. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and vote on the agenda. All in favor?
Maybe.
Oh, yes.
I have another change. I'd like to add the news report. That was on the previous agenda, but it wasn't on.
Oh, I didn't have one.
Sure, yeah, there was no, there was the intersection at 15 grand.
Oh.
And another note on in the mayor's report, the previous agenda, it wasn't included in this.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
No.
Yes,
The reason it wasn't included in this was because those ones were specifically tabled to the next regular meeting, and the motion for this meeting was only to handle the items that had not been discussed, that had not gotten to on the agenda.
okay, so it'll be.
So it's included in the next agenda.
Yeah, and there was that, kind of that confusion about all that.
Yeah,
Could we move it to this meeting?
It's not agendized.
yeah, it's not agendized.
Then
All right, so next meeting. All right, anything else in that regard?
No, thank you.
Okay, so let's vote on the approval of the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion passes. So let's go ahead and vote on the policy specifying what banners to fly.
Did you have a second on that?
Yeah, we do need a second on that, so.
I'm sorry, I just thought I gave.
No, you're fine. You got the second on the agenda motion?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right,
And that was to put it on the agenda for June.
One of the, either of the
I'll
June.
second that. Sure.
sure, okay. Any discussion on that one?
Do you want to know? So here's my reason is that, and I don't want to preface this with, I'm very much a supporter of pay rights, et cetera. But this wasn't ever discussed with the trustees, and I feel like it's really important that we have a policy about what types of information can be put on town property.
Okay, that's fine. So all in favor? Opposed?
Oh, hi.
Sorry. Well, we will when we discuss the agenda, when we set it up. I mean, this is just to put it on.
Okay, I got actually a comment about the approval of the agenda. If I
Okay,
could just say it. Suzanne Watson, I want to say the packet was not live and you had to scroll down to get to the topics. And it would be nice when you come on to the topic for this current agenda, if Corinne or someone could tell us what page we're on of the old packet. Thank you.
all right. Announcements, I would like to announce that Lincoln Fox has delivered 4 bronze sculptures to the town, which he has donated. They are on the 2 on the piano, 1 by the piano on the floor, and then 1 back here in the corner. And these sculptures are worth $50,000. And so that was a very generous offer of him to provide these. Now we'll just have to figure out where we want them to. Yes,
Can they be secured overnight? And the
well, they'll be locked.
police,
Yeah, this building will be locked.
$150,000 worth of sculpture. Here's 50. Oh, total.
Yeah.
Oh, well, still,
It's okay to have announced stolen.
I guess, yeah.
It's
that's
small.
okay.
All right, any other announcements? All right, seeing that, let's move on to policy and procedures regarding police officers at meetings and expelling a person from a meeting. This is, oh, this is page 11. And then there are some points for board discussion, and then the Colorado statute on public trespass. All right,
So make a motion that expelling a citizen from a public meeting requires a 3/4 vote of the trustees.
okay. Is there a second on that?
Second for discussion.
Okay,
So the reason, obviously, the First Amendment to the Constitution states that Citizens have the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. And when you throw a citizen out of a meeting, you just took away a fundamental constitutional right. Having said that, no constitutional rights are absolute. For example, the classic one being First Amendment freedom of speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So there may come a circumstance where we actually have to expel a citizen, drunk or otherwise, from a meeting, but that's a serious consideration. And when that happens, I think we need a 3/4 vote of the trustees to do it. In all the years that I've been in this town, except for quite recently, no one's ever been thrown out of a public meeting except one citizen I heard of before I was on council. That was in the 1990s.
All right, other discussion? Yeah, John.
Sure. Picturing the heat of the moment when somebody bullies their way past the time limit or threatens somebody to stop and have a civil and orderly parliamentary discussion makes no sense. So as you said, the First Amendment is not absolute. I've looked at a whole bunch of legal websites, and there are the classic 7 court cases against, exceptions to the First Amendment, but there are numerous listings of what are called conduct regulations for courts and for public meetings, where, classic Judge Judy hammers the gavel on, on whatever the stone there and says order. You can't just say what you want, and that's for sort of an obvious, evident reason. And I think that applies to here. And to have a discussion, like I said, to have a discussion would be sort of an exercise in absurdity to go through that whole process when somebody is really out of order, out of line.
Dave?
I'm just saying, yeah, we can expel someone from a meeting, but we got to vote on it.
Yes.
If I may, could we have everybody? I guess my point is that each trustee should have a opportunity to speak before anybody speaks twice. Is that correct? That's my understanding.
Yeah.
That's you. Okay.
Thank you.
If I may?
We will
Thank
do
you.
that. All right. Would you like to speak?
I would, thank you. So my recollection from our presentation from our attorney from CIRSA, Sam Light, was that we are not the ones who determine whether or not someone is in or out of order or breaking the law. That is up to the officer that is present. We don't have the authority. We're not a judge. We don't have the authority to determine whether or not someone is making a threat or has rescinded their rights to speak, their First Amendment rights. And if you recall, Sam's example of this was there was a meeting on the Front Range, he said, where everything was a fracas and the board went home and they just shut the building down, right? They didn't arrest everybody because that wasn't in their right. So I will be voting against this motion because it is my understanding that we do not have the authority to determine what is said in this room. If someone is breaking the law in this room with regards to their speech, then that determination is to be made by the police and not by us.
Okay, Dave?
Let's see, 2 sides to that. And what I remember from Sam Light is he was quite reticent about even having a police officer at the meeting. And I tend to not want a police officer at the meeting. So that sort of negates what Thomas has just described that Sam Light suggested. And so I like the idea of having to do a 3/4 person vote, because in some ways it stops what's going on. I think it takes the wind out of the sails of the person who is being contemplated to be thrown out and gives the trustees an opportunity to make a motion and do some discussion. And we should preface that maybe with a 5-minute break. But, we know what's happened in this town, and it's not as if we've ever been threatened physically. It's just been a verbal differences of opinion.
Well, let's get to that when we get it. Okay, Mr. Newton.
Hi, I remember distinctly what Thomas is describing from the Sam Light presentation, and I agree with that part of it. I also agree with what Trustee Smith is saying about the intimidation of an officer being inside the room. So it seems like we've been handling it fairly well by either calling for a recess or just adjourning. Seems to be our best tactics without inflaming the issue further. So I'll also be voting against the motion.
Okay, anything else? Dave?
Well, one solution requires a police officer to be present or to be called in on short order, and they may be out on patrol. It's whatever the council wants. I just don't want to see citizens thrown out of the meeting unnecessarily. So I want to have some sort of obstacle to that just being decided by the chair. What Thomas did point out, we do have control over what happens in this room during a public meeting. So we can make those kind of decisions as to whether someone's out of line or not. It's not like we are being a judge and a jury, but it's just we're running this business. If we stop it, as Dave says, if we stop the meeting and adjourn, we're basically stopping all of our business just because of one unruly person. I think you get rid of them and you move on with the business.
Thomas?
Thanks for backing me up, Dave. Appreciate you, Dave K. And I think that if there's a determination, I also agree. I think that I'm with you guys. I don't want to have a police officer here. I don't want to throw people out, right? I think that that's a last resort. And I think that if there is a determination that there's been a violation of law, like if somebody's actually threatening somebody, I think we can all agree that we call the police. Right? So we can make a determination in that regard, right? But we can't say you have to go, right? If we want to do that, we can say it, but we have to make sure that we have it in ordinance or in our meeting regulations. And I will fight you very, very strongly that we should not have such language in our ordinance or in our meeting regulations. I think that we should allow people to say whatever they want to say within the bounds of the law. And if we don't like it, maybe we should change what we're doing.
Okay. Mr. Valens?
There's no requirement for the breaking of law or an arrest. So here's a legal scholar website. The government is permitted to make laws regarding rules and laws regarding the conduct related to speech, such as by stating when speech may be provided, where it may be provided, and how it can be communicated. Courts generally uphold these types of regulations as long as they're considered content neutral. So you don't have to break the law. There's no law involved. There's no arrest involved. There can be. That's perfectly okay to have regulations and rules.
Yeah, Ms. Smith.
I don't have any more comments.
Okay, Dave, do you have anything else to say? Newton? Okay. And we do have a resolution that does outline some of this stuff. And so.
Is there a hand up?
All right. So it seems like you already have some baseline. Yes.
I just wanted to provide clarification. Following CERS's training, I had heard that there was an interpretation that Mr. Light had stated that he didn't encourage officers being in the meeting room. So I did ask him and said, I have heard from community members that they're stating that at the training, you said that the town should not have a police officer attend board meetings. Is this accurate? And he stated, no, that is not correct. My comment was that they should not be positioned in the room such as to dissuade a person from speaking. So for clarification, he didn't say they shouldn't be in the room. He just said, don't put them, don't have them up in the front or anything. Although in the past, when an officer wasn't in the room, it was just, they were provided direction to be in the building so that they could be in working on people working at the police department or something, and it clearly needed. They can be summoned pretty quickly.
All right. So anything from the public? Yes, Ms. White.
I'm Suzanne Watson, and I'm a member of the public who's been expelled from meetings on 2 different occasions. And then I had a very near miss recently. I'd like to say the first time I was expelled, it was actually a violation of my First Amendment rights. I was at the podium, I was talking on the agenda item, and because the mayor didn't like what I was saying, I was talking about a double standard that was between this agenda item and a former one. I was escorted from the meeting. I was taken off the podium and escorted from the meeting by the police. And technically, I could have sued the town over that. You guys risk lawsuits when you start playing with violating people's rights like this. The second time, I don't quite remember. But that being said, I think there's this kind of tyranny that we're seeing sometimes with mayors. I think Charles Stewart was especially bad about that. And I'm a law-abiding citizen. I joke that I wasn't a criminal until I moved to Paonia. I mean, anyway, what I want to say is it also trickles down to the staff, because I was recently ejected from the front office by one of your employees. And I was given CRS 18-9-110, causing disturbance in a public building. And when I read that, I see the employee as the person who caused the disturbance. But I think if you guys start ejecting, even if you vote to eject people, you need to know what laws you're following. You need to know the statutes, you need to know the resolutions. I would like to point to our resolution here, or our resolution about public comment. It doesn't say the comment has to be on the motion that's on the table. It says the comment is on the agenda item. That's very broad. And we are being restricted by the chair quite frequently to keep our comments specific to the top of the agenda, the motion that was made. And that's wrong. And I could get kicked out of a meeting because of this misunderstanding. So I think there's too much of a propensity to kick people out of meetings. Another thing is I'd like to see a police force that stands on principle and uses that professional judgment instead of taking orders from staff and the chair. If they feel that something's not being violated, yet they shouldn't be expelling people from the meeting. I mean, I feel like I'm in a petty dictatorship sometimes around here. So I'm glad that you brought this forward, but I don't see, I mean, I know we're having a discussion, but it sounds like everything's hunky-dory up here as far as you guys are concerned, and it's not.
Thank you, Suzanne. Mr. Bruner.
Yeah, Over. So this is not a court of law, as much as Charles Stewart wanted it to be. It's not a court of law. A court of law is very different. It's very constrained. The judge has absolute mandate to control the discussion and keep things exactly on point. This is nothing like that. I think that this is a public meeting where the public gets to speak, and there are important constitutional rights that are exercised here. I think what I got from what he was saying was that a police officer should not be directed by a person on the board to expel someone. That if you've got a police officer here, they should be able to use their own judgment as to whether a law is being violated. And the law that we have, the town has, that is the most pertinent, I believe, is the disruption of a lawful assembly that's on the books. And I think if Mr. Weber could amend his motion to say that what you would be voting on is whether or not you feel the person has violated that ordinance and disrupted the lawful assembly in the absence of a police officer to use his own judgment, I think you'd be on the right track here. Because yeah, you shouldn't be usurping the judgment of a policeman who's here. He should have his own judgment of whether or not a meeting is being disrupted. And all the things about, personal attacks or not addressing some particular person or something like that in the resolution as reasons to be expelled are bogus. They're totally bogus and they're against the law. And they are the things that if someone actually pushed it to a court case, you'd lose on those grounds. And so I think you should amend your policy to remove all that and replace it with do not disrupt a public meeting. We have a law. I don't remember the number, but you can look it up. And if 3/4 of the trustees find you in violation of that law, or if a police officer is present and they find that way, you'll be ejected and possibly charged with violation of that ordinance. That's quite simple, I think.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. All right. Oh, Michelle. Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that I agree with the suggestion that having a police officer at the meeting, it does feel like an intimidation tactic. And I also think it's probably not the best use of time for our small police force to have an officer sitting in the meeting for 3 hours. I think generally they don't need to be present. And if someone was actually threatened, you could call them in if needed. Second point I'd like to make, it seems that when people are being asked to leave a meeting, it's usually when emotions are running very high and it's not a very organized situation at that point. So I like the suggestion from Trustee Smith of taking a break, maybe take a 5-minute recess anytime that's being considered, just so everyone can calm down a little bit before making a decision. And then I also agree with Mr. Bruner that if you're going to make these decisions as a board, it would be best to revise the resolution that you're using as guidance so that it's extremely clear about what situations would give the board the authority to remove someone from a meeting, and so that it can be applied consistently for your legal protection.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to that expelling a citizen from a public meeting requires 3/4 of the vote of the trustees. Is there any other discussion from the board?
Could I just add, I really liked Bill Bruner's position of saying, have an officer make the decision. I think he said make a decision and then do a 3/4 vote. Is that what you had said?
No, I think, no, it could be either way. If he's present, it should be his judgment.
So the reason I ask is I'm just wondering if this should be amended a little bit, but I'm gonna just leave it at that. But one thing I wanted to, when Suzanne got up to the podium, reminded me of a meeting we had last winter and a gentleman walked in. And it's someone we've never seen before and we all could see him. And it was a little disconcerting because he was dressed in a very long coat and bundled up and you could only see his eyes. And it was kind of like, oh no, I don't want to be a statistic. And somebody did contact the police officer who was in the meeting and he came in and spoke to the man. So the reason I'm saying that is I do think it's good to make sure there's an officer in the building during a meeting, not so much for the public as much as that was a little disconcerting. And he turned out to be a perfectly harmless person, but his demeanor and the way he was dressed, he could have easily had a gun under his coat. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay, sorry. All right, so we have anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I want to say aye, sorry.
All right, 2 ayes, all opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
You said nay.
No.
Okay, all right, that motion fails. All right. Did you want to try and make another motion?
For expelling?
Yeah, right, we're still on this.
Well, maybe could we break it into 2 pieces? First, I'd like to make a motion that we do not have an officer present at the meeting, but we ask that an officer be in his office during the meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
do I have a second on that?
second, I'd like to amend that motion
Okay,
to say that having a police officer at a public meeting requires approval of the mayor and a trustee or 2 trustees.
okay. Hold on, I'm getting the first motion.
Yeah, that's the agenda.
Okay. Do we have a second on the motion that having a police officer in a public meeting requires the approval of the mayor and a trustee? I think you just specify how many trustees instead of making it one.
Mayor and a trustee or 2 trustees.
Yeah, Pick one or the other.
Okay.
Okay. So the amendment is that having a police officer in a public meeting requires approval of the mayor and a trustee. Is there a second on that amendment?
Second.
All right, discussion from the board.
So the reason why I put that in is that I have been at meetings where a police officer was necessary. And Ron Rao was our mayor at the time, and he had an uncanny ability to know when items were too hot. He had an ear to the ground. And so he would call a police officer who would stand discreetly in the back and just watch stuff, because the room would be crowded, it'd be all the way out the hall, and people would be yelling at each other. So having a presence was, did calm things down, but it was rare. It was very rare that we had a police officer on the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Markle.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to refer to Sam Light, and I did have a quote, I guess, or maybe not a quote, but after reviewing, I reviewed his speech regarding this matter. And he was clear that the board does not have a right to direct or removal of citizens. It's at the officer's discretion, and also any officer present should be tactful and discreet, just as Dave described. So I think that it makes sense to, and he also gave the example of they wanted the two guys at the side of the room with guns, right? There was a board somewhere that proposed this, and he was, his take on it was, you're not going to do that, right? Okay, that's when he said that. So I think that in the interest of good governance, we have to take it on, we have to believe that everyone here is here with good intent, and to treat the public as our neighbors, right, and not our enemies, and not to be afraid of them. And I understand that it may come time when we need help, but I'm with you. I think that this is a good way to make sure that we're not intimidating anyone, and we're making a welcoming and wholesome atmosphere where everybody feels comfortable and safe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Knudsen, do you have anything to add on the? No, okay. Ms. Finn?
I just was gonna do it grammatical to the amendment. Could there be, my motion was to not have an officer in the meeting room, but have them in the building during the meeting, comma, however, if necessary.
Okay, so that would be another amendment.
Right, it would, because I feel like it's it doesn't make sense. It contradicts what my motion was, the way it was worded.
I was just trying to clarify your
Right.
motion. Your motion has precedence.
Right, mostly I'm just going grammatical, that it grammatically make it clear that it's but there is the possibility. But
Let's
to
vote
get
on-
somebody, okay,
Let's vote on this one, and
Okay.
then we'll deal with the but necessary.
okay.
All right, Mr. Elliott.
How do we know it's necessary ahead of time?
That is a really good question, because Ron, being in the laundromat, just had a lot of feeling for what was coming up at a meeting. You got to know, you just have to know your community, and maybe some feedback from administration that people are coming in and yelling at them about whatever topic it is. And then you just know there's some subjects that are just hot. Water, I mean, you can go down the list of ones that.
Yeah, we have, sometimes in our agenda meetings, we look and say, this is going to be a long one. All right, anything else from the board?
Do you have a criteria though that you would use?
Could I register that in the record?
Okay, is that spelled 3 M's?
That's 3 M's, yeah. I see you said the blind man.
Let me just add another piece of, I guess I was not thinking that this would be predetermined. I was thinking more that it would be decided during a meeting, that two of the trustees might suggest we get an officer in here, which would be kind of disruptive, but I wasn't thinking we'd have to know ahead to have an officer in for the whole meeting, but that's what you intended based on the history. Okay.
In your scenario, I thought about that one where a couple of trustees lean over to the mayor and say, look, what's going out of control. And so you're saying have an officer on call, which is a really good idea. Bring them into the back of the meeting to watch stuff. Yeah.
But what you amended the motion with would be
But something fixed, because having them whispering to the mayor here in front, I don't. it almost like it would be better just to, I mean, it could happen in a meeting. There's nothing that precludes it happening in a
Right,
meeting.
so it doesn't have to be predetermined, it could happen during the meeting. Okay,
Correct.
this is, okay.
Okay. Anything else from the board? All right, Ms. Watson.
Suzanne Watson. So I am wondering, this motion, does it preclude having the chief of police attend the meetings? Because we haven't been seeing a chief of police attend the meetings, but in the past, we've actually had the chief in an official capacity at every meeting. So when the chief is at the meeting, are they like off duty as far as law enforcement is concerned, or are they actually a police officer in the room? If you could answer that.
Well, I think we would have to talk about that. Thank you. Anything else? Yes, Mr. Green.
Yeah, you're really micromanaging. You've got an ordinance that says you appoint the chief of police. He's a direct report. He's got every right to be at the meeting, probably a responsibility, once you've appointed him. You could have, an officer should be on call somewhere in town. But these trustees leaning over and whispering to the mayor is an improperly convened executive session in an open meeting. You just can't, you're really micromanaging.
All right, anything else? All right.
Disruption of
Okay, Mr.
Just to comment about the, I think it was really well put by Suzanne about the fact that we typically have a police officer here in the person of the chief of police. And once we have a new chief of police, I believe it would be beholden to that person, him or her, that they come to the meeting.
Right. Thank you. All right. Anything else from the board? All right. Seeing none, we have an amendment.
Just say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Maybe you guys should just table this till you get a chief of police and just have his input as to what he thinks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we have an amendment to the motion that having a police officer in a public meeting requires approval of the mayor and a trustee. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, Mr. Knudsen votes nay as well. All right, so that motion passes. So now we have the full motion, unless you want to add the but necessary to it.
So we just
If
passed the
necessary.
motion to not have an officer in the meeting room, but have him in the building, right?
No, we haven't gotten to that motion.
Oh, we haven't gotten-
Just did the amendment.
Then I have no idea what I want to do.
Okay,
I've lost
let's just go
whatever.
ahead and do this, and we can amend it to
Can we
vote.
have a rereading?
Yes, I would reread it first. That we not have, there's a motion on the table that we not have an officer in a meeting, but in the building during the meeting. And that having a police officer in a public meeting requires approval of the mayor and a trustee.
Okay.
All right, everybody understand what the motion is?
Yes.
All right, yes, Mr.
And it would be my understanding this is direction to staff to do this. I'm not sure if we don't have the right to determine employee behavior. Right?
It would seem like it would fall to staff, yeah.
Okay.
All right,
You apply.
Once more.
that, the whole motion?
Yeah.
Okay, that not have an officer in a meeting, but in the building during a meeting, and that having a police officer at a public meeting requires approval of the mayor and a trustee. Okay? All right, you ready to vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Mr. Knudsen is nay. All right, that motion passes.
That's how we get through it.
All right, next, strategic planning session agenda. There was a agenda in the proposed agenda from Mr. Levesque, DOLA impact.
Can you tell us what page it's on? We don't
This
have.
page, No.
14.
no.
Is this in the
page
last
one.
packet from the
Oh, that's from the
29th?
last pack, yeah.
We don't
Oh, I
have
don't-
that.
I can get that for you. I can get that for you, Susan.
There's no packet that's available to the public.
Yeah, it is. I downloaded it before I came to the meeting.
It was-
It's not on the web.
Yes,
It wasn't-
I got it from the website.
Yeah, now it's on there. It wasn't.
It wasn't available. It wasn't sent out via email. But yes, but we're looking at on the old one, page 53, 54, sorry.
Oh, it just came up here. I'm sorry. That was literally an hour before. Thanks.
All right. Discussion from the board.
I would like, and I don't know if we need a motion for this, but one of the pieces is this, is I want to remind everyone that at May 12th, the board made a motion and it was made by Trustee Weber, seconded by Trustee Stelter to schedule a strategic planning session without a catered meal. So the board has voted to not have a catered meal. Therefore, this person who is willing to pay for a catered meal is moved.
Okay, well, my assumption was the town wasn't going to pay for a caterer.
To
And
me,
it's up to the board. I mean, if you guys don't want to have food at this meeting, I think if you want to keep people involved in this meeting and to have them stay, then we need to provide food because it's running from 10 to 4.
let me
That's
just
a long
add
time.
that this is a public event sponsored by the town of Paonia. There can be no secret person paying for food.
If they are not doing it through the town, they are paying it.
No, absolutely not. Everything we do as a town has to be completely open. Because if you have someone who is not stepping up and explaining they did it, there is a perception of some kind of influence, quid pro quo. This is called corruption. This cannot be we are managing taxpayers' money, and it's wonderful that somebody wants to step up, but it cannot be anonymous. And I think so if that person does not want to say who they are, absolutely not can they provide a caterer. This is municipal business. We take an oath of office about fiduciary responsibility, period.
Mr. Knudsen.
The headlines in the St. Louis paper today indicted 3 of their council members for bribery. And so I just wanted to point out that this can happen anywhere. And I agree with Trustee Smith about anonymous contributions or people that are unknown paying for things behind. This does not smack of transparency. I think it's bad precedent. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Yes, Mr.
So I think that a lot about this meeting lacks transparency. I got a letter from a citizen with a list of names of people who had been specifically invited. And it was apparently publicly available court request. And I think that the fact that, it's a public meeting, so no one's excluded. Right, so technically, I can see an argument that this is okay to do, but the way that I see it, by making specific invitations to this meeting, what we're doing is stacking the deck with certain people who will be more likely to be there. And this meeting is to determine the very future of this town in a very broad way, that's my understanding, right? Strategic planning. We're going to have vision and mission review, visioning group exercise, visioning recap, what problems exist, problems recap, what has to change, needed changes recap, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, wrap up SWOT, right? So this is like very big picture planning, and to have a very select group of people who are particularly invited is totally undemocratic and smells terrible, right? I don't like it at all. So do we have a motion on the table?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Have water bills gone out this month?
They have.
Yes. Okay. What mechanism do we have to communicate with the public?
All right, it's been in the shopper on April 27th. It'll be in the shopper next week. It'll be on KBNL. I will call up the DCI and have them write a short article in the DCI for this. There was another one. There's one other thing.
Our website.
Yeah, on the website as well.
Okay.
And then it will, and I'm also thinking about making posters, planning posters.
Okay. I think that we have 3 weeks. I think it's time to have posters up right now.
No, 2 weeks before it's when you put posters out.
Okay. I think the posters should be in the works. Posters should be ready to print, right?
I can whip up a poster this week.
Excellent, thank you. I I saw at the chief of police meeting, a very small group of people show up who were not a full representation of this community, right? And my understanding was that it was due to poor messaging. One of the candidates' wives did not know about the meeting until the day before, right? I hear. So I would like to see very clear, very broad messaging for this meeting to the entire town. I want to make sure that no one gets missed.
Well, you know, even if it's on the water bill, people will be missing.
Well, you know, it's up to us to make sure everyone's included. We can't expect everyone to know everything that's going on.
But we can put it out every way we can.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Knudsen, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I think we do overlook the chance of getting it out on water bills. And maybe there's a chance of doing that.
No, it's already passed. Water bills have gone.
I was going to make that motion if it was possible.
Yeah. All right. So if the catering person agrees to catering, agrees to have their name shared, would the board be okay with catering? Instead of being an anonymous donation, it would have a name attached.
You get a pop-up.
I have no feelings about the food other than I think it's inappropriate to accept gifts as public servants.
Well, this isn't a gift to us, this is a gift to the town.
Well, that's what I think. If you disagree.
It probably should be, the name should be public.
All right.
I mean, we are a public business, and I don't know why it has to be anonymous anyway.
Okay.
Anonymity doesn't survive in this town very long.
Okay.
My experience.
Mr.
Why wouldn't we just pay for it? It's a town event. And it seems like it's a lot clearer if we just pay whatever the costs are.
We already voted to not do it
Yeah.
on May 12th.
And we can change our vote.
And so I'm a little concerned that the mayor still went ahead to do it and read into that because we weren't going to pay for it. I really have a problem with that I feel like our vote was undermined and then have it anonymous. So that's just, very upsetting to me. And, we voted and discussed it, and I have to tell you, we've had so little involvement in this process through and through. I didn't even get an invitation that other people did.
I'm assuming the board's going to show up.
No, that's not the point. I have so little background information on this. We did not discuss the Blue Sage. It was already decided. I do not want to see another dime spent on this process personally. It's enough to do the Blue Sage. People can bring, you can break for a half an hour, and if people don't come back, so be it. But we've spent, this has been done so poorly. And now is our opportunity to talk some more about it. And so I'm going to stop right there about my feeling about spending any more town money on this. Thank you.
I have a motion.
Yes.
I move that we establish a policy of communication for town events,
Okay,
town sponsored events. Sorry.
do I have a second on that?
Sure, I'll second.
Discussion from the board?
Okay, so I'm seeing this same problem. What we have is a lack of communication, right? We have a select group of people who are getting intended communication, explicit communication, and we have the broad public who are getting cursory communication, passive communication, right? So if we're going to advertise in the shopper and we're going to have ads on KVNF and the DCI, and we're going to put it on the website, I think that we should have a clear policy of how people can expect to get information about what's happening in town. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who would like to come to meetings or attend a committee meeting or go to a tour, plant tour, or participate in a planning commission or session, but just didn't know about it, right? So if we have a place where people can know they can go consistently, and I think a calendar on the front page of the website with upcoming events that is kept up to date and part of the clerk's duties would suffice. And then all the other media could get their information direct from there. That would give everyone an opportunity to participate in these upcoming events.
Okay. Other comments from the board?
I think it's also important, Thomas, that we state on the webpage or somewhere that the public is always invited to everything that we have. In other words, because I've had situations where people didn't know or feel that they could be there. And if they just realize that it's an open invitation to anything that we're doing as a governmental organization, and that was noticed also, it would help bring citizens in.
Yeah, I think that's.
All right, other?
Makes sense.
I like, the calendar is probably the best place to do it, and routinely it's not been kept up, and I know it's an issue with whatever the name of the website is. Is there a way to get around any of this, the fact that so much is not posted? And the link, when it is posted, the link does not give you any information. You have to know where else to look. Is it possible that we can rely on the calendar? And I mean, electronically.
They have to be manually inputted, and we can't do it as recurring events. And as long as each individual event is inputted manually, then the links and the time is correct. It doesn't have a time change issue.
Okay, so generally what that means is we're gonna, as part of this motion, to me, it would be a priority for the staff to be in constant contact with that calendar and keeping it updated. Even when there's, a 2-day notice that there's going to be a tour of the whatever. So it has to become a staff priority. But it seems like the best place, because that's where I go first. And I'm a trustee.
Okay. Mr. Valentine?
No.
Okay, Mr. Kennington? No. All right. Ms. Pat?
Thank you. So constantly, time and time again, this is the issue. Why are the police in the back of the room? Because the citizens are upset that there's not communication, there's not transparency, there's a couple people that know what's going on, and it's not disseminated to the rest of the board. And that's an issue. These meetings that you're setting up, they need to go through the board. Every detail of them, they need to go through the board. Where, how much, the food, everything. This other one that's going to be up Stewart Mesa, that needs to go through the board. Why is that so hard? You're a board. All of you represent the people, not just one or two of you and a staff member, all. And that's how it should go. If you want to get the word out to people, I'm wondering who was invited to begin with. Who was invited? And why? I'm here every meeting. I was invited. You were invited. The trustees were invited. Who was invited? Do I have to core that for that information? Also, I think there's probably 1,000 people on that email. Why not just put everything on that email out?
Thank you, Ms. Watson.
Suzanne Watson. I'd like to say that I hope when you invite people, the primary, my brain is a little foggy today, person would be someone who's a tax-paying member of the community, a voting member of the public, and not outside people who live outside our boundaries. Because it's our money that we're talking about spending, the people who live here, the people who pay taxes for it. So I think that's really important to think about the tax-paying public and the actual citizens of the town first when you do these invitations. So we're not being influenced by people who don't, who live on the outside and just have a lot of opinions about what we need to be doing. Secondly, I look at this agenda and I feel like I need to core something to find out the discussions that have gone on behind this, because this is so incredibly vague. I mean, does strategic planning really start with this much vagueness? And if it does, why are you inviting specific people? I want to know what the background story is and what the ultimate plan that, there's obviously a plan here of a direction that someone wants to take. And I don't see things, I mean, is it going to be about the budget? Is it about public utilities? That's not the kind of people that apparently have been invited to this strategic planning session. It makes me very uncomfortable. There's got to be more information. We have 19 topics here and it's just as vague as can be. There shouldn't be one individual person donating money for this. I mean, do they have a dog in the fight here? And how could they benefit from that favoritism, that like giving you guys a favor, giving the town a favor? We're being bought here. I don't want to see us being bought. I know in the past, they've hosted events and they've gotten a few items from Don's Market. Jane Berry used to do that. I think when Ken Knight was here, that was done. I always thought it was kind of unnecessary because it's mostly junk food. But I'm uncomfortable with someone paying for it. And then as far as messaging, why don't we have a sandwich board in front of town hall? Everybody else has a sandwich board. You know, you could put like important events on that. We also let everybody post their events on the inside of our town hall windows. And yet we're really bad at posting our own. DCI could write a really good article about this before it happens to let people know what to expect. We have a pretty good writer right now on that DCI staff, but I think it's so vague, it's hard to even know if it's worth attending, frankly. I mean, I just feel very uncomfortable looking at all of this. It's very mysterious. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is,
Mayor,
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brewer.
We have one on.
Okay.
Bring your own before you can lunch. I think you're gonna be hungry. And I have a question. Is this something where it's envisioned that everyone that shows up has a vote for the strategic town for the plan? Or for strategic plan for the town?
It's not a voting thing.
It's not a voting.
No, it's group discussions and then the things that come out of the group discussions then get pulled together. By the facilitator. Do you know what that was? Our DOLA.
Okay, so he pulls them together and then what happens?
Then it gets published and then it gets taken to the town retreat. And the board members will look at this and use it as information for us to make a strategic plan.
At a retreat?
Yes.
So you're going to be doing fundamental town business to set the long range plan for the town and these retreat touchy-feely, closed door, somebody else set this all up, somebody else hired the facilitator, somebody else put out the list of the people that are supposed to show up. I'm on the list, the official list for town notifications. I didn't get an invitation to this thing. I think this is all Kool-Aid. It's all Kool-Aid. You guys are just being led around by the nose to be involved in this kind of stuff.
All right, Ms. Patterson.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like you've had some good suggestions from the public, and I feel like overall both this and the board retreat that are supposed to come after, I think there's potential for those to be really good and useful and valuable sessions for the board. But I think the way it's been put together makes that harder to accomplish. It's not been transparent. And the board hasn't been involved to have any sense of ownership over this process, over what you're going to talk about, over who's involved. And I think you're beyond the point where you're not going to get over that discrepancy of communication between the people who got an invitation and the people who did not. So my recommendation would be to cancel both of these, bring them back before the board in a meeting to decide how you want to move forward with your planning process, and then let the board set how these are going to happen instead of just forcing them on this particular schedule. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, well, we have a motion on the table that there should be a policy on town-sponsored events.
Move to amend my motion.
Okay.
I want to have a discussion about policy town-sponsored events at our next meeting.
Okay. Do I get a second on that?
Second down.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor of the amendment to have at the next meeting? Aye. Opposed? All right, so we have a motion on the table to have a policy on town-sponsored events at the next meeting. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so the person who is paying for the catering is my daughter. She lives in Denver. She will not be at the meeting. She does not know anyone in town except for a very few handful of people. She has no influence in this whatsoever. If I can make a motion? Yes.
I absolutely echo Michelle Addison's proposed motion. I motion that we table both of these, the strategic planning and
So you
the
want
team
to
building.
cancel them?
I want to cancel both and then start over with a full board discussion of what's intended from the, hang on, let me just stop. I make a motion that the currently scheduled strategic planning session and board retreat be canceled.
Okay. Do I have a second? All right, no second. All right, that motion dies for lack of a second. All right, so at this point, my daughter will pay for the things. She has no influence at all in this town at all.
So we need, okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to make the meeting on the 25th potluck rather than catered.
okay. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Discussion from the board? It's,
Okay. I think that, I don't know how many of you heard about the regeneration discussion that happened this past week, right? Nobody? Okay, see, they need better messaging too. There was an event at the Ellen Hansen Smith Center this past week that had several speakers regarding water use. And this is broad, this is not specific to town, this is valley-wide, right? Or whatever, universe-wide, right? And it was a potluck and the atmosphere was created and the neighborliness and affection that everybody that just comes with feeding each other, I think goes a long way to building relationships and collaboration. It sets a tone and it's almost like having a date, like everybody's going on a date, right? And rather than going to a restaurant, we're going to cook for each other. It's just more intimate and friendly and neighborly.
yeah.
So tomorrow, Friends of the Paonia Library are having their annual meeting and a potluck. And that's the way we've done it for decades. And it does kind of build people together. Not only that, I like to cook and I'll cook something for it.
Okay, anyone else? Yes. Mr. Knut.
Yeah, it just takes the whole issue of influence off, even though I do agree that there's very little influence from the person proposed. It just sets a bad precedent.
Anyone else?
So we ask everyone who's going to attend to bring something. Is that
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to a potluck.
No, I'm just asking for
You
clarification.
don't have to bring, I mean, you're highly encouraged, of course.
Of course.
But, I mean, if you show up with a bag of chips or nothing at all, you can still.
That's still-
That's kind of how.
That's not what Pam's second question was. We want everybody to do the usual participation, whatever that may be. Okay.
All right, yeah.
Mine is just logistical. Is there, how would we eat in the Blue Sage?
Oh, we could set up tables. We will be having
Down
tables
front?
set up.
So is there room down front? I haven't been in there in a while. I have to
Oh,
admit.
no, it'll probably be on the side where the mirrors are. So there'll be
Oh, okay.
tables for food
Okay.
over there, and then there'll be other tables so for breakout sessions for everybody.
All right.
All right. Yeah,
Thank you. So last year, I remember the strategic plan here, or it was something else here, and the number one thing was to promote businesses in town. So why couldn't you just take a break during that and go off and eat lunch at the actual businesses in town?
okay, thank you. Anything else? Oh, yeah, that's fine.
I'm afraid I won't be able to attend because I work during the day. And I am kind of disappointed about this because now I'm hearing that everything you're going to talk about is going to go in for future planning. How can I have input? How can I have input as someone on the zoning board of adjustment? How can I have input as a citizen when I don't have access to this? Is it going to be recorded? And if it's recorded, how do we comment as public? I really think I really do appreciate, I appreciated the motion that failed, that you might want to think about this a little bit more before you just go forward with this, because again, I know some people have weekends off, but daytimes are very difficult for people sometimes too. It's not only for working people, it's for retired people. So how am I supposed to engage?
Well, I would say send an email of suggestions to the town. When the document comes out, make comment on it.
But I'd like to know the range of everything that's being discussed,
Everything.
because, well, are you recording this?
No, we can't.
Well, it needs to be recorded. I think it needs to be in town hall here, frankly. I mean, I feel very uncomfortable with the venue. A Blue Sage is a theater. It's not really, it's more like being preached to the audience. I don't think I can envision speakers. I don't really see an interactive thing, and the whole lighting thing is an issue too. It's not open and transparent, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion on the table. No, we don't have a motion on the table.
No, we don't.
Is this actually a meeting?
Oh, yes, this was a, no.
You're talking about the
Strategic
2025 strategic
Yeah,
plan.
the event, is it actually a meeting of the board?
If there's
board-
3 or more of us, it has to be a
And it will
public
all
meeting.
be, yeah, it'll be open to the public.
Well, I believe there's a law that says once you start recording your meetings, you've got to record them all. How can you do this? You're going to have a public meeting with, it's an official meeting, and you're not going to record it? This is, you've already set the precedent.
All right, we'll find a way to record it with audio.
Why are you doing this? You're going to have this segment to show up that sets some ball rolling that gets summarized and pumped out to another mysterious meeting, and it's going to become the blueprint for the town. I don't get why you're doing this. This is so loaded and one-sided. It's absolutely inappropriate for a municipal organization. This is like for a nonprofit that has an agenda and a membership and do whatever they want. You're not like that. This is a public body. This is a municipal organization. Please don't do this.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, this room is bigger than the Blue Sage.
No, it's not.
Oh,
No, it is not.
The Blue Sage, that side
Yes.
room is not,
Yes.
I have, anyway, I have to agree with Mr. Bruner. If it's a, yeah.
Is that a motion?
It's
All
not a
right,
motion.
we have a motion on the table, yes.
Motion for the potluck
Okay,
and not,
Those
I don't have a second.
yes, we do.
Oh.
Dave
I
says-
second it.
All right, any further discussion on the
You
motion?
want to fly with that if we're going to have it here?
We have it here, potluck is still good, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we can fit 50 people in this room,
Yeah.
tables
Yeah.
and all the rest of it.
Yeah, the capacity is 216.
Yeah, but that's standing.
No, and we could have the potluck out in the hall. Are there plugins?
There's everything you need in this.
Might be good.
No, the kitchen is non-functional.
It's non-functional.
It's non-functional.
Is it like the water system?
Does it have electricity? I mean, it has electric
Yes,
outlets.
it has electricity, it just doesn't have a function.
Yeah, I mean, because you'd never have a stove.
Does
in
the
a
Blue
potluck.
Sage have a stove?
No, they don't, but then it's a pot.
So we have.
We have a motion on the table for the potluck. Let us deal with that. All in favor of making this simply a potluck? Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion passes.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion that it be conducted in this room so that it can be recorded.
Second that.
All right, discussion from the board? All right, discussion from the public? All right, we have a motion on the table that it be held in the community room of Town Hall so it can be recorded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, one nay. Okay, that motion passes.
Trustee Valentine and trustee Knudsen voted nay.
All right. Next up is the Mayoral Planning Commission trustee appointment. So we are short one trustee for the planning commission, and in part because of that, because we have the last planning commission meeting because we didn't have a quorum. So does anyone have an interest in doing this?
Can I just ask, can we not jump this so soon? can we come back to this strategic planning? Because I feel like now that we know what's in here, we really need to talk about. I don't think we need to be set here as trustees. We need to be audience, right?
No, but I need tables for breakout sessions.
Right, no. Mostly, I just think we need to talk about this a little bit more as the strategic planning, because I agree that this agenda is so non-informational that I think we should have, maybe not today, but I'd like to make a motion that we discuss the content of the agenda.
I think we should have Mr. Levesque present at that point, since he is the one that put together this agenda and he's the one who facilitated.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yeah.
There was a motion made.
Right.
The chair has asked for a second for the motion, rather than respond to the motion. Thanks.
Do I need to repeat my motion?
Please do.
I make a motion that we add an agenda item to our next meeting to discuss the content of the preliminary agenda.
Second.
Okay.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to remove that to the
You know,
future?
like I say, if we have Mr. Levesque there, since he's the one who is facilitating this meeting, he can provide information.
I kind of think we could do it now, only based on what my concerns are.
Mr. Knudsen.
Did I get called on?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. It's our meeting. It's not his meeting. He's only the facilitator. I felt really dismissed when he was doing our presentation, when I suggested that we have some major issues in this town that need to be dealt with, and learning what our demographics are from the state and getting a high level overview would not be helpful for what we need to do right now. We have a housing crisis going on. We have a water and sewer crisis going on. I'd like to see us dealing with the nuts and bolts of that rather than this high level stuff. So I just wanted to point that out, that I think we should be discussing what we want on the agenda, not what he wants on the agenda. Thank you.
All right.
I do agree with Dave that my concerns are real nuts and bolts issue. And this one is really just big pie in the sky stuff. From my experience with meetings like that, they actually get very little traction in the end.
Okay. So are we gonna continue with this motion?
Or do we want to just discuss
Or do
right
we
now?
just want to discuss it?
No, it's motion seconded.
Yeah, she rescinded it.
I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay.
So,
You want to just approach this now?
yes, because I'm prepared to bring up some of my
Okay.
concerns. And I agree, because I agree with Dave, with Dana Levesque, and Dana doesn't know our town. He knows, he's done strategic planning for lots of towns, but we know our town and we know the things that we have been going in circles on. So for one thing, I would like to know more about what are we going to do? How are we going to use the previous comprehensive plan, the previous goal setting that was done? Comprehensive plan is 1996. And I think we need to understand that we should be talking about those major headings that have to be in a comprehensive plan. And that could start the discussion. And I think we need to look back at what we thought was important with the visioning that went on. It's on the webpage, takes up a whole slot on the town webpage. That should be discussed. Here is where we were, and have that ready for people to either review in a very, well, no, actually what I think we should do is set up the strategic planning based on those entries in the comprehensive plan that we have to use again. I believe we use those same headings when we do our next comprehensive plan. And under those, talk about the water situation. And let me just add, when we had our advisory water committee meeting, Jeremiah, who I have a lot of respect for, said, so what exactly is it we want to do with all this water? We think that we want to know if we have to add more taps. What is our strategic plan in terms of housing and growth? And I think that is a great topic for strategic planning. And Dana referenced that with his example being, how many brew pubs do you want? But I think the very clear question, what do we want to see for growth in this town, is a very important point that could be its own agenda item after we give everybody an update, what's going on with our water situation. So I would just like to switch this to more reality-based headings and where we are and what do people want to see in the future in terms of businesses, homes, and brew pubs, and stick to something like that. Thanks.
Okay.
So you're.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Markle.
Oh, sorry. Okay, real quick. What you're saying, we can just pluck the agenda directly out of the comprehensive plan, just like that.
Wait,
That could actually be a motion.
Oh, okay, well,
But let's let Mr. Markle speak first.
Yes.
So as I recall, I did watch this video of Mr. Levack's presentation twice. And as I recall, his, I forget who asked the question, but someone asked how the comprehensive plan relates to this meeting. Trustee Smith, okay. And his response was that this strategic planning session would direct the comprehensive plan. So my understanding, and this is like, this stuff is kind of like corporate speak, SWOT analysis and like vision, vision values kind of stuff. And so it's really broad and, not, like you said, not usually implemented in any concrete fashion. But if we have a good representation of the public at this meeting, what we can glean from their input is how they value the parts that come together to make the comprehensive plan. And I totally agree with Dave and everybody else here that the majority of our time should be focused on concrete improvements and maybe plans for how to get water systems back online. But since we're talking about this item here now, I think that to take a day and do a comprehensive or overarching strategic plan does make sense. And whether it's going to be useful or not, I don't know, maybe. But at the very least, we can meet some neighbors and have lunch and listen to what they value, and just listen to each other talk about these topics are broad on purpose. The getting down into like specifics about how we want to grow or not, or how much water we have or not, are not parts of this, is my understanding. So I don't know, is there a motion?
No, there isn't a motion on the table.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with the agenda for this as it sits, other than I don't like to sit through corporate style meetings.
So you're making a motion to approve the agenda as stated?
Sure, I'll move to leave the agenda in to the determination of Daniel Levack.
Do I have a second? All right, that motion dies for lack of a second. Would someone like to make a motion that we pattern this on the comprehensive plan? Topics on the comprehensive plan?
I just want to add, everything I read, I did a little research. They said you should have your comprehensive plan and then do strategic planning. So I don't know honestly what's right. But I think we get more valuable, discrete information to this town if we stuck with headings that dealt with that. Let me just read them out here. I just pulled up the 1996 plan. Let's see, there is demographics of what the town looks like. That doesn't change. Open space and recreation, environment and natural resources, infrastructure, water and sewer, transportation, major heading of housing, community facilities and services, economic development, regulatory. And then it gets into the land use components, it gets into residential, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are the main headings, and we actually have goals that were involved or prescribed in the 1996 plan that could almost be looked at to see if those goals, this plan is really pretty good, in reading it. So I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but I'm just trying to see what would be a way to get at this in terms of the agenda.
It
and it
seems like
becomes
if
our
we have-
agenda
Yeah.
and not Dana's.
Right.
Would
If
he
we
still
said-
facilitate for us?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
No, if we set it so that we hit all the points in the comprehensive plan, or the main headings in the comprehensive plan. Hit the headings in the comprehensive plan and have him do the group sessions, walking through those. And then he can consolidate the information and bring it back to us. And then that would give us a chance in our retreat to set goals.
And I wonder if some subheadings that are some of the ideas that came out of this comprehensive plan, I don't know if that would be too much, it would be seeding the discussion too much. But there is so much in here that I think hasn't changed.
And I like the way you just stated it right out. The very first items you pointed out, those are definitely action items that we could proceed on. So I make a motion that the agenda for the strategic planning session be based on the comprehensive plan.
All right, one second.
Second.
All right, further discussion from the board. Mr. Crankton.
I'm trying to be considerate to the three people that are waiting for supper here, and I'd like to get an idea of how long I should tell them to wait.
Oh. Well, the planning commission shouldn't take a lot. The ORC may be a long one. The acceptance and settlement release on Eric Pace shouldn't be a long one. 45 minutes, guys?
Perhaps I should tell them to,
All right.
We have a quorum without it, right?
This is true. We have a quorum without it. So, you can go
Yeah.
if you want. We still have a
Up to you.
quorum.
okay, you still have a quorum.
Yeah.
Let me see what their plans are. I might be back on. Just a second. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
We used to do that.
Yeah, well, no more.
So
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to make the agenda based on the comprehensive plan.
the goals in the comprehensive plan.
Well, not necessarily the goals, they're pretty specific. I think we do the headings.
The headings, yeah.
Yeah, based on the comprehensive plan headings. Okay. Anything else from the board? All right, anything from the public? All right, seeing none, all in favor of making the agenda based on the headings in the comprehensive plan?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
And, all right, so that motion still passes. All right, next.
Thank you.
Next is the planning commission trustee seat. Is anyone interested in serving on the planning commission? It meets, it doesn't meet monthly, it meets max on 3 or 4 times a year. Yes, Mr.
My understanding is the planning commission is required by state statute to meet monthly.
I don't think so, no.
Yes, it is. Regular meetings. It has to hold regular meetings. They've
Yeah,
always been
it's
scheduled and now
The
that's-
agenda's empty. Yeah.
It'd be nice to know, since we haven't discussed our committee reassignments, it's hard to know how much juggling of things.
Well, it would be really nice to get someone appointed because we do have, I mean, the comprehensive plan and approving, starting forward on the comprehensive plan. And the county wants to do our IGA, intergovernmental agreement on our planning districts and the urban growth areas and all of that. And so, yeah, and so having somebody on that would be good so that we could actually have meetings. Yes, Mr. Knut.
If it's helpful, I'd like to volunteer.
All right, thank you. All right.
I was gonna suggest Rick Stelter in his absence.
Dave, if you wanted to offer, fine.
That's how you get.
All right, so I then appoint Mr. Knudsen to be on the planning commission. Done. Moving on. All right, the ORC proposal. We have one proposal and then Mr. Archuleta is the second, so we have 2 proposals on this. Pardon?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So as it's included, my report is included in the packet that The board had directed that a request for proposals for an operator be put out. And this operator would be the ORC and would manage and maintain the water and wastewater system for the town of Peonia. The RFP was advertised. There were some changes to deadline. As put in here, there was some language that was questionable when it came to how the bids would be open. And that's been addressed in the template for moving forward with RFP so that that doesn't occur again. There was also a significant portion of discussion regarding the use of an open contract as a submittal for an RFP. I spoke with the town attorney on this more than once, also again in preparation for this agenda item. And he stated that his recommendation to the board would be that typically you would have, and it may be something the board would want to make a policy on, that regardless of length of time of a contract, you may want the individual, the person that holds a contract to submit via the regular RFP process as well. Waiving certain documents and things that are requested isn't unusual. It doesn't mean that you don't accept an RFP, but he said it would, for clarification, the board could make that a policy or direction moving forward. The reason it was accepted was because it was a contract that had just begun and covered the areas that were the necessary areas in the RFP, and so that was why it was permitted to be included. As far as going outside, away from how the RFPs were provided or the format they were provided in, I evaluated the two applicants on the evaluation criteria and proposal content and organization that was in the RFP as published, and provided additional information about the licensing and references in all the steps. If there's any specific information the board would like to know regarding the review and process that was taken, I'm happy to answer that. Otherwise, I feel that the information is primarily included in the packet.
All right, questions for the town administrator about these, the process, or what you found in the process? Yeah.
I don't always have to start, but okay. Well, so first of all, we weren't informed what the attorney said. Let me back up. So I came to the bid opening, and that's where we learned we had seen the contract with Benny Archuleta to that point, we being the trustees. We saw it that day. It was posted right after that, and the RFP was removed right after that. So there's two things. You have said in here that I was present at the bid opening and I'm an advisory water committee member. That is no tacit approval of anything. Yes, I was present and I had nothing but questions. So the way you wrote it makes it look like because I was there, somehow I had some tacit approval of using Benny, et cetera. So I just want to make it clear that I didn't.
No, and that was not what I was stating, the facts of who was in attendance and clarifying that you were there at the time of the RFP, which was the reason that when I talk later about the other advisory water board committee members' input that was provided.
Okay, because I didn't.
No, I
didn't have any input at that time.
No, and I didn't state that. That was not the intent.
Well, that's what it sounded like to me, that just my presence made it somehow that I was in agreement. And we didn't know what the attorney said.
I stated it at the meeting.
Later.
In that meeting that he had said that he could submit his.
But all the trustees haven't really, we weren't kept up on this, because I want to say that you violated the purchasing policy when you did the contract with Benny Archuleta. You were allowed, the town administrator is authorized to enter an agreement for professional services not exceeding $2,500. We were not part of that contracting. That contracting was going on while the RFP was still open. It had been reopened. So we definitely need a policy on RFPs, because I feel like you could have asked Benny Archuleta to submit an RFP or
Yes.
a request for proposal and not just rely on the contract, which was, to me, a disservice for the person who did go through all the work. So that's how I feel about it.
I understand that. We are required to have an ORC.
You got a back and forth
Right.
conversation.
Yes, it was an opportunity to ask me questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Questions to be
You're
answered.
stepping on order argument here.
All right, I will stop there. I got my points out that I'm quite concerned about the way this has taken place and and yes, I know we needed an ORC, but that didn't mean that he had his foot in the door for regardless of what came in with the proposal. To me, Mr. Archuleta or his company that he works for should have submitted a proposal to stay on even footing. And we would then be comparing apples to apples because we are comparing apples to oranges now. Mr. Whatever, Kirk, he was proposing to have people on site all the time. And we have an ORC who's on site very rarely, but when he needs to be. So we have an apples and oranges situation. I don't know that we can change any of it the way it is now, but I clearly feel like we need a proposal to not let these cross purposes happen when we're trying to do due diligence to get proposals and then allowing someone to kind of get their foot in the door and the other guy's out. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the town administrator about this or what you found? Yes, Mr. Mark.
I was also present at the bid opening, and I also want to echo Trustee Smith's sentiments about the way that this was put together. Seems favoritist, I'd say, because one of the applicants provided a proposal and one of them did not. And has the excuse from our administrator and attorney not to provide that proposal. So just as kind of a human thing, that stinks. Regarding the specifics of the proposal and the contract, I suppose, again, Paige is not like, she knows what's up. I agree again, like basically these are not comparable. We're looking at two different offers of two different jobs. So one of them is far more expensive and far more involved, and one of them's much less expensive and much less involved. So that's really the question that we're being asked right now is how involved in ORC do you want?
Totally. We need a totally involved ORC. Situation demands it.
May I provide?
Yes.
So again, the evaluation criteria, when you're looking at the evaluation criteria, and if you are looking at the two proposals, the one is, I agree, and I stated that at the bid opening as well, that having never been faced with a situation where the contractor requested to submit the contract, that never happened before. And so the question was broached and the information given was, yes, you can accept the contract. It's one of the things that you use when you're determining whether or not, when you're looking at and evaluating, it's one of the pieces to evaluate is the presentation and completion of the RFP. But when you get down to the facts about it and the issues that the board had broached with me prior, that there, with our previous ORC, which is the number of other companies worked with, and the pull that had on the time, you fall into the same situation. The Snow Line has more companies that they're working with, and currently one employee, only themselves. They stated that they were doing some interviews to hire one additional employee. Archuleta, that's what it's called. It's just called Archuleta, is one employee also, who's here every week, not just sometimes. He comes every week and whenever he's needed. He's called and is always available as well. The qualifications, so as far as the licensing, both licenses meet the requirements of the town licensing. Mr. Archuleta does have a higher license. He has the highest licensing. So that was, I'm providing.
Yeah.
No, you may not.
This is what we're down to. Point of order. We have this information in writing.
Yeah, it is. It's all in here.
Yes, it is, but I just wanted to make sure that it's clearly identified and being, and also being considered in the discussion. And as far as the staffing level and the number of other communities that are all worked for, that's not all in the information, as well as references were checked. Again, would like any of that additional supportive information that was provided, I'm happy to give it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Do we know how many communities Mr. Archuleta is servicing?
3.
Including us?
Yes.
And how many is No Line doing?
6.
Okay. I would also like to have a comment on the references.
To what extent?
How many references were checked on each and just were there negative references?
Can't give you the exact number of references that were checked, but I want to say 5 for Mr. Archuleta. 5 for Archuleta, all were good references. I'm sorry, that would, and state references also were excellent references. All the references that Snowline provided, as well as individual references that were said, hey, call this person, they may be able to give additional references, were called, and Snowline did not receive all good references.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
One big difference between these, I mean, it is hard to choose because I got an RFP on one hand and something else on the other. But one big difference between these two, and I would be satisfied with either one of them because they're qualified and are light years beyond Travis. But one is local and one is, and water problems happen really fast. And having someone local that's on tap, that's Mr. Morgan, would be a great advantage.
Okay, other things before?
I just have 2 more questions. The first is, rather than, in my opinion, rather than going to the attorney to ask him whether you could accept the contract as an RFP, I really think you should have come to us and explained exactly what's going on. Because we could have identified whether Benny, who you obviously needed in short term, whether he could stay short term and ask him to do a comparable RFP. So I feel like, again, the attorney is your go-to person when really come to us. We should be the ones saying, go to the attorney, and we could have probably solved this without the attorney's time. And my last question is, I'm very concerned that Mr. Archuleta did not have insurance the moment he signed that contract, the requisite insurance. You're saying following review of
An updated policy.
okay. It says current insurance certificate,
Yes,
but he should. Is it because his lapse?
yes, it has, and he has a standing with state and with the other firms that he signs a, I can't remember the legal name of it, but it's basically an exemption.
Okay. Frankly, I would like to see his insurance be attached to his contract on Munico.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's important for us as trustees to understand that everything required of a contractor has been provided. We get nothing. And this is, it's cause for concern. It creates time sink because I'm asking the question. So we need to know more up front. Again, thank you.
Okay. Paige, would you like to actually see an official RFP from Mr. Archuleta?
I would.
Okay.
But
I make a motion that.
wait. Let's give Mr. Clinton's opinion before we go to the motion.
That's the motion I'd like to make, is that we see a detailed RFP from Mr. Archuleta in the same format as required by the RFP.
All right. we have a
Thanks,
second.
Dave, for echoing me.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All right, discussion from the board on the motion. Okay, discussion from the public on the motion. Yes, Ms. Watson.
So I noticed a few things about the RFP, and that was, it contained a sample contract. I don't know if it was very long, and there was a lot of like repetition in it, but it had a sample contract in it. And that's the contract that Archuleta co-opted for his own with the town, but he removed items of the sample contract in the RFP. And that was obviously agreed to by the administrator. So what happened was you changed the terms of the RFP for Archuleta. And did you let the other contractor know that the RFP had different terms at this point? Because if it's required by law, if there are changes to the RFP, you have to let the applicants know. So I think we violated the law here. I mean, I'm not the expert on this, but I think there was something bogus and illegal about what happened. So look at the sample contract, look at Archuleta's, and you'll see the same thing with made easier. And that's what he submitted for his RFP apparently, or his contract. So I'd also like to know, where does Archuleta live? Okay, why is he signed up with Alan Leslie's business in Carbondale? I noticed the address.
Mayor,
Yeah.
Candy, I'm sorry, your ice crunching is driving me crazy. Can you put that aside for the remainder of the meeting?
Okay, there's this address for Alan Leslie, who is the signer for Travis, basically. And I'm very skeptical about that company. And if you talk to Phil Sariani, he had very bad things to say about Alan Leslie. So what's the connection between Alan Leslie and Archuleta? When Travis was here, we heard that this system was so difficult that we needed 2 ORCs, or maybe even more, because our system is so difficult. So how does having one person who doesn't even live near at hand here one day a week as our ORC, how does that comport with what we were being told a year ago? So I think that's about it, but I do believe that the other applicant, if Archuleta is submitting an RFP, the other applicant, I don't know if he still is interested in this job, but he should be given the same terms that Archuleta is being allowed to write his RFP on. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Brewer? Yes.
May I have an opportunity to answer the question since it is pertinent to this? First, the contract that is in the RFP is actually more stringent than the contract that Mr. Archuleta signed, because the one Mr. Archuleta signed has no revisions to it and is directly from CEPAG's website. That's the one that is provided directly from the state.
But it's verbatim.
And is required. So there is additions to the RFP contract, which would be a contract that was executed for a permanent ORC contract, not a month to month. The second is the difference between the information provided from ORC Public Works Director Loberg at the time was because Mr. Loberg was the Public Works Director and the ORC. He was one person who was operating all public works departments, as well as only one person that was operating both water plants and the sewer plant. In an effort to address that issue, we have 2 additional employees whose primary focus is only the water and sewer, both who are actively working toward getting licenses, so that we'll actually, if they all receive their licenses and have a contract ORC, we'll have 3 individuals working our water plant that have licenses and our sewer plant that have licenses. That's the difference with that one. And I'm sorry, with 4 questions, I've forgotten the others.
Okay, well, we're going to move on. Mr. Bruner?
So do these RFPs include a price? So this is one way you fix bids. You solicit a proposal from someone and they tell you how much they'll do it for. And then the rest made public. And then you go back to the guy that you want to hire and you say, well, this is what this guy will do it for. What's your price? And it's unseemly. If you want to start the process all over again, that's okay, but you've at least got to solicit another RFP from the other guy. And it's like, Mr. Lober was the Public Works Director and the ORC, and the ORC for, at one point, I think 5 other water companies, and then he got down to where there were 3 and he's being sued by one of them. And it's like, and then we had a $27,000 a month replacement that said you need so much more help. And now we've got a $1,500 a month stand-in that I swear is a loan license. And I think that's a really bad policy. And now you've got a loan license at a cheap price and a guy that wants to do the job for a real price. And please, use your heads.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bruner. All right, so we have a motion on the table to ask to require that a complete RFP be obtained from Mr. Archer. Oh, I'm sorry.
So considering that the water system is the absolute most important thing in this town, We have Archuleta, who bless his heart, I'm sure he's a lovely person, but we were up at that 1-million-gallon plant and literally he probably said, 5 words. It was Jeremiah, who I absolutely adore, who is like on it. But these guys, Jeremiah and, Jordan, are wonderful, but they don't have their license. It's going to be years. It is going to be years. So we have this guy who lives in Montrose, really never here, didn't say a word, is really, come on, like he's a signature. And these 2 guys that are fantastic, but it's like they are not accredited. They don't have their certification. Travis got to run those plants and he didn't have his certification either. So we really have to get serious here. Like, this is the most important thing. The citizens are what you really have to look towards. Do they want certification, accreditation, a decent person running this? And that's really what you have to look for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So, what's the board's feeling? Because Bill did raise a point that having an RFP, that's kind of, should we just go ahead and go for the only RFP we have?
We have a motion on the table.
I know.
Right, let's
We can
go.
recess that if you want.
Yeah, let's dispose of that motion in some fashion.
We definitely need to rescind that motion.
Okay.
I will rescind that motion. And frankly, we can't afford the proposal as provided. It's $9,500 a month.
Yeah.
And so in the absence of knowing our budget down to the fine lines, we are really between a rock and a hard place. And my thought was to see if Mr. Morgan would not hire a second person, but if we could hire him to be on site. But that's a whole different proposal. So we're really in a bad way. The advertisement for this went out twice. We didn't get anybody other than, we're in a terrible place. And honestly, Jeremiah and Jordan can't have their certification for a couple more years.
Well, one, you can get one within the first, a very short period for the bottom certification, but then you have to carry that for a certain amount of time before you can test it.
Right, and then we still have to have an ORC who's licensed at least with a B, I believe, for drinking water. Or is it A? Does it drinking water? It's a B.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. My suggestion would be to continue with the monthly contract that we have right now and revise the RFP to a shorter amount, specifying exactly what the board is looking for, what the town wants, as far as on-site, how many days that, and then publish it that way and see if you have that interest between either the month to month or Snowline or anyone else.
I really like that suggestion. And so I will make a motion, but I'm going to add to it. I make a motion that we create a new RFP, which will be worked on by Corinne and 2 committee members, 2 trustees.
Or what about the advisory board?
Too many.
We could do that. We only have myself and Phil Sirianni and Mike right now. But we could, the 3 of us could work with Corinne.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Board members are better. Well, it's the town's.
I'll have to just have some chutzpah. Yeah, you know I'm happy. Yeah, I'm short on that. Anyway, so we'll make a motion. I make a motion that we draft a new RFP in conjunction with the Advisory Water Committee and Corinne for what's the word?
Give me an org.
Reposting. For an ORC.
Re-advertisement.
Okay, for an ORC.
For an ORC, an on-site ORC.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
So we have a motion to create a new RFP with the Advisory Water Committee and Corinne to get an on-site ORC.
Yeah, that was a good suggestion.
All right.
And that way we restart the process and eliminate all the chaos.
All right, so do we have a second on that?
Second.
All right, further discussion from the board? No? Yes, Mr. Merkel.
I wonder if making somebody jump through a second set of hoops is going to be, if they'll think it's worth it for Mr. Morgan. It'll be Mr. Archuleta's first hoop jump and Mr. Morgan's second.
Yeah. Ms. White.
I'd like to say, Snowline and Kirk Morgan was the only contractor who got his RFP in on time. And then the deadline was extended because Archuleta wasn't quite ready yet with this contract he was working out with Corinne. And that's why the deadline for the RFP was extended. But is that correct?
No,
Okay, no, so no one got theirs in the beginning.
no, that's not correct.
So no one got theirs in the beginning, right?
No, that's not correct. That's not correct, but no one got one in.
So one person got one in?
Yes, what was incorrect is saying that the deadline was extended as an opportunity for Mr. Archuleta to continue to work out a contract with me and then submit that, because that does sound slimy, and no, that is not what occurred.
So who got their contract in by the first
Snowline.
deadline? Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, they were, and it was extended. because-
Secondly, it would be interesting to know what the, I mean, are you putting it out there again for the whole world to see and in conjunction with the Rural Water Authority? And you might, the Water Advisory Committee, I think, should have Scott Thomas on board with this to help you with that RFP. He seemed to be a wealth of knowledge, and I would recommend that you would do that.
Well, that's a good suggestion. And I will just add that the board asked that the RFP be extended because we only got the one proposal.
Yeah.
That was what happened there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, just to clarify.
Yes.
It's also like, it's really not a personal thing. It's like, yes, you want to have friends and nice people there and great, but it's like, what is best for the town and in what configuration? This $9,000 a month is for two people, I think. I don't think it's just for that. It's two people. So you sort of have to have more information, everybody, like how much is Archuleta plus these other two people? And are you hiring two more? And if it's just Kirk Morgan and who he's hiring, it's like, where does it all add up money wise? I don't think anybody's talking about that yet. Also, I heard at the Water Commission meeting that Travis is back and in the plants, like helping out these two guys.
No.
Now, that was spoken at the Water Commission meeting.
Yeah.
And if that is happening, why?
No.
Ms. Ferguson.
No, what was stated at the meeting by Jordan and Jeremiah was that they had reached out to Travis for information. Because regardless of what anyone thinks, he has not been back in the plants or is not helping and doing any such thing. But regardless of what anyone thinks about him as an ORC, he is a font of information about our system that no one else has.
So is Kirk Morgan, and also Josh apparently reached out to those guys saying that he would come back as just a water guy without being paid to help those guys. So, and that's really not what I heard about Travis. He was actually at those plants, but I'll go back and look. So I would just, if y'all could just like crunch those numbers, because in actuality, it may be actually less with Kirk Morgan.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to create a new RFP with the Advisory Water Committee and Corinne for an on-site ORC. All in favor? Did you want to?
I want to amend it only because I want to amend it. It wasn't clear that in my mind, this is a temporary contract. It is not replacing in-town employees.
Right.
And that because I think Christina brought up a good point, but I still think we need Jeremiah and Jordan.
Yeah.
We just need people here more often. So I'm wondering if does this discussion enough tonight to change the motion?
I think we all understand that Jeremiah and Jordan are.
I'm going to, I suppose, amend the motion to include Scott Thomas and a group of people to put together.
If you will.
Okay, is there a second on that?
Second now.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes.
Of the amended version.
That's the amendment, which now we have to pass.
So I'm trying to be clear on.
All right, so the motion is we have to create a new RFP with the Advisory Water Committee, Scott Thomas and Corinne for an on-site ORC. All right, everybody understand?
Yeah.
All right. Yes,
Just as devil's advocate for clarification, if I doubt it'll even run into this, but if for some reason Mr. Thomas was not available to participate in this, is it understood then that the AWC and myself would continue in the process? I just want to make sure because we stated it and he's not available.
And who knows, it may just be me and Corinne.
Right.
okay. All right, sounds good. All right, all in favor?
I,
Opposed?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Knudsen says aye. All right, let's move on to committee reports. Paige.
okay.
Acceptance.
Oh,
settlement.
we have to accept the
Oh, I'm
settlement.
sorry, I missed that. All right, so, yes, we have the acceptance of settlement in the case case.
I make a motion to accept the settlement in the PACE. Accept the settlement
In the case
release
case.
in the PACE case.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right. Discussion from the board? All right, seeing none. Yes, Mr. Bruno.
So it's impossible for me to know what's in your settlement there, and
It's on the website. It's in the packet.
I wish I'd gotten a notification that there was a meeting this afternoon that would have included the packet. I didn't get that. But in any case, I made a speech at the last meeting, and I'm not going to repeat it, but I do want to add one thing. That this apparently was a CIRSA mediated thing.
Yes.
Well, number one, CIRSA is not a neutral party in any of this. Okay, whoever heard of a neutral insurance company? Their main concern is their bottom line. And CIRSA provided the instruments of Mr. Pace's torture in the beginning. They provided hacks who one guy made rulings on his time cards when the copies of the time cards provided to him were redacted. And you had another guy who was an ex-police officer who conducted an investigation that was, the court found to be nonsensical. So that's all I just want to say is that CIRSA may have mediated this thing, but CIRSA is not a neutral party, and CIRSA provided the instruments for his torture in the beginning.
All right, thank you. All right.
You should give it a.
Anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the settlement on the PACE case. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. Now committee reports.
Okay, and I didn't know if you have one too as tree board?
I didn't prepare anything.
Okay.
I could.
Well, I just don't want to overstep you, but I want to point out that the new logo for the tree board is in the packet.
Yes.
It's very nice. So we had a meeting, lasted about 2 hours. It was Jeremiah, Jordan were there, myself, Bill Sirianni, Mike Drake, and Christina was there, and I forget, Skip, we're in the audience. And I have to say, it was just, Phil Sirianni kind of jokingly called it a seminar, but it was a seminar, and it was really good. We had a lot of back and forth, and a lot of good things came out of it. But one of the things that, primary things that everyone agreed to on the AWC was the PRVs were the top priority. And we wondered if we AWC members could get a copy of John Tedder's report. Okay. And then to follow up on that, and perhaps it needs to be at the next board meeting, but to find out what's going on with the RFP for for us to hire somebody to come in and take care of all those valve vaults. And there was a discussion about whether the water line between the 2 million gallon tank and the 1 million gallon tank exists. The note, what we talked about, I know Dave has, and I'll let you say, I'll tell you what we learned at the meeting. It was that there is a line between the two tanks, but I mean, not between the two tanks, there is a line. However, a new line will have to be created from this single line from the 2 million down to near the plant. And it has to get a right-of-way approval, and it is a couple yards of line needed to get the water from that main line, I'll call it an 8-inch line, into the 1 million gallon tank, and that intermediary line does not exist. And that's what everyone at the meeting kind of said. And again, is that the case? So that line needs to be put in. So we can't do anything with the 2 million gallon tank until we can get water from the 2 million gallon plant to the 1 million gallon tank. and we don't have that, and it's apparently there's a right-of-way issue, and there was some discussion that that line may have to go under a drainage, which might be a problem. I haven't heard any of us working on that. So that line sounds like it's paramount, and it's the first I've heard about it. And I heard about it at the 1 million gallon tour. So I'll just throw that out. Don't have to answer that right now because, so that needs to be assessed. Another thing that came up is would CDPHE allow the town to use the treatment delivery system as enough? Would it be there long enough to be the final disinfectant and not even have to have a storage tank? We don't know the answer to that question, but that's a possibility. And the other thing that came up is that Travis had been, I thought he was at the 2 million gallon plant, but he was talking with Jordan and Jeremiah and expressed his thought that actually a flow sensor and actuator could be used in place of an altitude valve. So I don't remember any of that, but I know we're going down the road for an altitude valve to get the 2 million gallon water to the 1 million gallon water. And I don't know what the status of that altitude valve is, but it's probably not useful because unless we have a water line to get the water into the 1 million gallon tank, the altitude valve is moot. It's inconsequential. So we need a clear direction of who's on first, second, third, and fourth. So, and I just really need to, let me just get through it because let me just get through all this and then we can decide how we're going to address these things. Because the AWC, it was quite instructive. We all learned things, but none of us had any answers as to what to do with things like that. I'm just providing this for instruction. There was detailed discussion on the various permutations that need to be identified using a cost-benefit analysis matrix, looking at the various ways to provide water to the upper and lower users while getting the 2 million gallon tank relined. There's a bunch of different things to think about and how much will one cost versus how much will another cost. And one of those was we talked about a second tank up at the 2 million gallon plant, glass line tank. And Phil Sirianni had just come from the CRW annual meeting. And as a part of that, he brought back a series of brochures from companies making various tanks and lining alternatives. And I've looked through them and it's interesting, but I'm certainly no expert. And I think he wanted someone, maybe Jeremiah and Jordan, to see these, to share with them. So I was going to pass them along. But if anybody like Thomas might like to look at them, because I know you talked to the gentleman with whose information is in the stack on their glass line tank. Because the thought is we may want to consider a third tank rather than possibly renting a temporary tank during all this. Maybe we need a third tank that could provide enough storage that we wouldn't have to think about building a reservoir, which seems pretty impossible. So that's just a thought and the things we need to start looking at. And if we do decide we want some serious alternatives to be investigated, we can get bids. All these companies were happy to come here, give us bids, et cetera. But we just have to focus on who we want to know from. And there was talk of the SRF grants and I think there are multiple times in the year.
The next one is coming up in August. We have a 1 month window to write that grant.
Yeah, and so maybe you and I should talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So those were it was a really good conversation. Let me throw out one more thing. The 1 million gallon tank has water in it. It cannot be used as drinking water. So it will have to be emptied and resanitized before any water can go into it during the 2 million anyway. So there was some discussion, is there some beneficial use of that water that we could use? And it kind of came out with no, because if people started filling up the tank that's in the back of their truck, with that water, they would contaminate the tank in the back of their truck they used to fill their cistern at their house. I mean, if somebody just did livestock water, but nobody has that much water they feed to horses. So we kind of dropped that idea and it's probably just going to have to go downstream at some point. But right now it's serving the purpose of keeping that tank intact because of the engineering. So that's it.
Wow, sounds like a great meeting. Yeah, Ms. Ferguson?
I was just going to share with you that Philip did share those also with me. He didn't give me the copies though, But, and provided them to SGM, who was the engineering firm who was working on that, so that he could solicit the bids and get that information.
Okay.
And the 1 million piece of line that's missing that you're talking about, this is where it can get muddled. That is the same section that requires an access easement for the installation of the altitude. So there has to be an agreement made with that landowner to be able to use that easement, to create the easement, so that we can install the altitude vault and connect that line.
And how's that going?
So it's going, but I don't.
Is it a money thing?
No, it's just, we already have an easement on that property and it has to be in a different location, so we're just trying.
And rearrange these, okay.
So Paige, there was a 2-inch line interconnecting the tanks, because I've worked with it before. Is it still extant, Corinne, or has it been cut, buried?
It's been cut.
Hmm.
I don't know when, but I know it's, from the information I was given, it's not useful anymore.
So I would like a little bit more detail on the state of this, like, sub-project. My understanding is that we have quite a bit of time and money already done, paid to engineering firms in the PRV engineering. And if we're waiting on an easement and negotiations for other work to be done, I would like to have a lot more detail than it's going. Could we get a statement prepared that indicates what's been done and when we might expect this to be resolved?
And are you referring just to the line between, to get to the 1 million?
Right.
That's your.
Yeah, this section that includes the PRV, or not PRV, I'm sorry. Altitude valve and the connecting line, 8-inch line. So we're saying. Yeah. Can we get more detail on where that is and when it might be completed? Yes.
Yes. All right, anything else?
No, probably the only thing is, I keep saying, I feel like, well, if we can get a copy of John Tedder's, and maybe, I mean, to me, the trustees should have the report as well, not just the AWC, in my opinion. Maybe, I don't know if we need a motion for that. But I think to find out exactly what is going on with the PRVs, because as Jeremiah said, we need to get those fixed so we don't have these blowouts and all the street repair we're paying for. So it's first and foremost. So I don't know if it could be an agenda topic and have information in one of the first meeting in June. I don't know what the agenda looks like for the first meeting in June, but this seems of paramount importance to at least understand the PRVs, what it's going to cost, and assume we can get those all fixed. And are they also looking at the addition of a 10th PRV?
It was suggested by JDS Hydro, but it wasn't included in Mr. Tedder's report. There's certain ones on the list that Mr. Tedder can do the work on, and then there's some that he could not.
Did he think we needed a 10th one?
He didn't say that.
Okay.
He just looked at what was here.
Do we need to do a separate look at that?
I can ask JDS because John and James were working pretty closely together.
Yeah, because if we need one, we better know sooner than later. Okay. So would you like to look at these, Thomas?
I'll do. Thank you.
And then maybe hand them off to Corinne and she can hand them off to Jeremiah.
Yes, is what?
So I didn't attend that meeting, but I was curious, are we getting any help from the Colorado Rural Water Association with, talking about the tank situation up there? And
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable that Travis is actually advising the town at this point. I think we need to find alternative help. And I keep saying, I don't know, but maybe the Colorado Rural Water Association would be very helpful to you. Don't they have engineers and, stuff on staff? And I feel uncomfortable with us just being funneled through one person. I think as the advisory committee, you need to be working with them directly.
I do not feel comfortable as an advisory committee working directly with anybody, to be honest.
Or even listening to them.
I would, only because we're just a committee, and if nobody shows up and you have to rely on mine, not the best notes, or watch I just think it needs to be more formalized. The AWC,
Okay.
And we only have 3 people.
Forgive me, then let's forget that. But I mean, you were talking about some pretty big ideas up there. And I guess what I'm saying is it's interesting to hear those ideas, but we don't have a legitimate operator. We don't have a real operator on staff right now. We don't have anybody advising us in any way. And in the absence of employee ORC, it would be nice to be working with, aside from all these expensive contractors we keep having to hire. And I'd like to look at those sources first. And is this the only committee meeting? I do want to just point out something that from a little earlier that was incorrect. And the state statute says the planning commission shall hold at least one regular meeting each month. At least one regular meeting each month. So if Dave Knudsen is listening, it's at least one extra meeting a month, despite what you're being told by your administrator / clerk. You should know the law. Thank you.
All right. Yes.
Jeremiah put a comment in.
Did you
I
read
just
it?
wanted to relay. It says that Travis isn't advising the town, he's relaying the street.
Okay.
I just wanted to.
Mr. Valentine, anything you want to report from the tree board?
Oh, since our new logo is in the packet, I guess I should say something. I'll try to make it very brief. The tree board is pretty busy and we're doing all the things we always did. But an issue has come up about quality of tree maintenance and tree removal. And the context of that is the trees were all planted at once in 1910. Not every tree in the town, but many of the trees along the streets. They grew fast and they're dying fast. And the sidewalks are the real nexus that the town has a concern about. And the whole issue of removing trees to fix the sidewalks, which a lot of people are opposed to. So a lot of the public has, it's a contentious issue. And the quality of the tree work is a contentious issue too. So what we're in the midst of doing now is, first of all, having more of a public presence. And that's what the logo is about. It's a logo because we decided to have a banner and have a presence at events, farmers market, and that kind of thing. But also, we took a long and winding road about somehow certifying, licensing, instructing people who do tree work, particularly in the right of ways. But we can't. We can't do that, to make a long story short. So what we're doing now is working on the permit, which people have to remove a tree or to work on a tree, and include people who've taken some training on a list of recommended tree services. So it's an avenue, sort of backdoor avenue to attempt to increase the quality of work being done on trees in the town. That's a very short version of it, but I think that conveys the process. It's not done, and we don't have any, final product to report. Corinne, I think we're working with you on that, aren't we?
Yes.
There are a lot of legal ramification. It's complicated. How does that work?
Yeah. It's all complicated. All right, thank you, Mr. Valentine. Yes, Ms. Watson?
I have a suggestion for Mr. Valentine to relay to the tree board. And that is, I think maybe working with carrots would be a great idea. And these are right-of-way trees that people have to expend a lot of money to maintain. I think they're more expensive to maintain than sidewalks because you're looking at every 5-10 years, they need major pruning, and we're looking at thousands of dollars. So I'd like to see some kind of a funding match offered by the town. Maybe 50-50. If people undertake work, use the town ordinance, cut to the town standards, use whatever contract is required. And the town has money in the form of marijuana licenses. And some of that money needs to go to maintaining our green infrastructure. The trees take so long to develop, and with these winds that we've been having and some of the climate change that we're seeing because of it, I think we're going to be seeing more and more cracking in trees that isn't going to show up until 5-10 years later in form of rot, in form of tearing branches. And then one other thing is the tree in Polis Park is dead, and that tree on Third and that guy who had trees removed there, that big corner house. I noticed driving down here, his tree is half dead. And I want to remind people, it's really hard to get new little trees established successfully. There's a lot of energy invested in the trees that we have. And if we could start maintaining them, I think maintenance is the biggest problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I underscore that everything you mentioned is actively on our agenda?
Okay.
And the funding thing we're exploring, that's a tough one too. But that's everything you said is very worthwhile.
The marijuana ordinance allows for infrastructure, that landscaping in the right of way, funding it.
What I sort of skipped over was that part of our public presence, the fairs and however we decide to deploy that will be to address some of the very things you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just had a question. Does the effort that you're doing on the permits and the things like that, does that need trustee approval to give it? Does it need?
Think so.
Because okay. So we'll see something about that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Mr. Moore.
I know we're all packed up and eager to get out of here. At the last meeting, we established 5 new committees.
Oh,
So.
I think that is on the
6.
agenda for the next time.
Okay. So I guess we're not getting any committee reports from non-existent.
Yeah, getting committee reports from non-existent committees is not going to help. I know. Okay, so quickly, we want to do this. How did we do tonight? Feedback from the board?
A little slow.
Okay, suggestions to speed it up?
I have some ideas, but they haven't crystallized yet. I'm just trying to see them.
Okay, well, when you get them crystallized, would you send me an email?
Yeah, some of it will come up in the next meeting.
All right.
I was wondering if anybody had motions prepared that weren't raised until after we went through some discussion.
Okay.
Not this meeting.
Right, yeah. I think that that's a good place for us to save a lot of time, is to have, and Dave Weber's a great example of this, to have motions prepared ahead of time as to, on a topic, however you feel you might want to see it go. And just have that ready in mind can save the round and round, like what are we calling this thing? The meeting on the 25th. Like if somebody had strong feelings about how they might want to see that go, maybe could have saved us quite a bit of time. Aside from that, I thought there was quite a bit of contentious tone and a little bit of argumentation in various parties.
Okay. All right, and how would you address that?
It's up to the chair.
Okay, anything else? Okay, well then, yes.
I just, I'm wondering, and just throwing it out there, if it's better to consider having the meetings like at 4:30, everybody's sort of like, no, okay, some people were. I don't know, for the staff and for the people, it's like maybe people are more alert and then it gets done faster, just throwing it out there.
One more thing before we adjourn, since we're in public meeting, I wonder if we might have a discussion and not, since this is not agendized, if we would be able to discuss this ordinance that's before you.
It's a little late to put it on the next agenda. But
well, I mean, basically, this is an opportunity for us to discuss it, and I think that it would be beneficial for everybody to at least, obviously there won't be any motions on it because it wasn't.
All right, does the board want to discuss this tonight? Only if I get a 5-minute break. Yeah, I think,
No,
no.
Okay, move to discuss the ordinance number 2016-02. Right now.
Second. All right, a second. Sorry. All right, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
There is a bug in that.
Oh.
So did you this part years and
Okay, first, wonderful. Thank you.
it's just the ones stating this.
What's your problem with it?
So you know, John.
For here it says.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
The appointments are to be made within 30 days.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Yeah. So it says.
So,
Doesn't matter.
even I can. Yes,
Do you know, because you're like.
so this office we're suing.
Make it a little bit easier, because I don't like to shout out. I remember.
Provide it later if you want.
That's good, yeah. Oh.